Hello and welcome back to Grief Inspired. If you don't know me, my name is Catherine and I help people through the grief process. So if you are grieving and you can use some help, you're definitely in the right place. So today I'm going to answer a question that was posed to me via email by one of my clients. And I love this question because I can personally relate to it, because it was a question that I asked to one of my therapists during my grief journey early on. So stay tuned. I'll tell you what that question is in a moment. Thank you so much for being here. Please continue to comment on my videos, like and subscribe them. And as always, if you find something really useful, please share it with others so that other people can find these videos and they can get help in their grief process as well. So the question that I want to answer today is, am I going crazy? I've had so many people ask me this question because going through the grief process can really feel like we're going crazy. If that's something that you have experienced, or if you've even questioned in your own head, I want you to drop a comment below so that people know that yes, me too, I have felt like I was going crazy. So I want to answer this question for you today because it was something that during my grief journey, I absolutely thought that I was going crazy. And I remember sitting in a therapist's office and feeling not like myself, being deep in grief, not knowing how to grieve, not knowing whether or not I could even get through the grief process, not having belief or hope that I was going to be okay, that feeling like my life was essentially over. And I asked her, am I going crazy? And she responded by saying, no, you're not going crazy. And she said, let me tell you why. And I thought this was such a good comment. And I always am reminded of it when anyone asks me, am I going crazy? Because that was the question that I was asking too. And what she said is that if you think you're going crazy, you aren't crazy. She said people who are actually having mental challenges, severe mental challenges, aren't really aware that they are having those challenges. So she said, if you think you're going crazy, you're not going crazy. So I want to put that aside to make sure that you know that you're not going crazy. But if it feels that way, that's why I want to talk about this concept. So I looked up crazy and what that means. Now, in the dictionary, and this is Webster's, again, clinical social workers, psychologists will never use the term crazy when talking about their clients. They actually are vehemently opposed to it because it's not really a nice way to talk about anyone. But it is part of our vernacular. We do use it. So again, the word crazy, when you look up in the dictionary, is defined as mentally deranged. And I went and I looked and I said, okay, well, what does deranged mean? Deranged means crazy. Basically, when you are in grief, things change significantly for you. You experience more stress than usual, of course. Maybe there is trauma that needs to be resolved. And again, I always differentiate grief from the trauma associated with grief because I think they're two things that need to be handled separately. Severe anxiety. If you have anxiety or panic attacks, these things can be really, really unsettling, especially if you've never experienced them before. So for me, I had always had general anxiety, so I knew what anxiety was. But when I went through my own grief process, it really cranked up the anxiety. And that's when I started learning what a panic attack was. And if you've had a panic attack, let us know below in the comments. But if you've had a panic attack, you know exactly what it is. You know what it does. You know how scary it can be. Our heart can race. Our heart pounds inside our chest. We feel like we're having a heart attack. Our palms can get sweaty. Our breathing can get really shallow. We think there's something wrong. I mean, many of us will actually go to the hospital or call for help because we literally think that we are dying. There can be digestive problems that come along with panic attacks. For me, I was debilitated when I had these panic attacks. Like I couldn't do anything. And then there's also this sense of what's called derealization. And it's a term that I didn't really understand, but it makes complete sense when I looked it up further, because the derealization is basically having a distorted perception of time and space, a feeling of unreality. So if you've ever thought about your grief and it feels, I use the term, it feels surreal, like it's not real. Like this isn't happening. A lot of us can experience this early on in our grief process, where you're in denial and you can't process this happened, and you know that it did, but you just can't wrap your head around it. So this is derealization. It can also be when you're having a panic attack, that feeling of being really lightheaded, because again, all of your blood flows to your heart and your central organs because there's fear involved and your body is trying to survive. And so it can make your brain feel, we can talk about it from like feeling foggy or fuzzy, and having this sense of being disconnected from reality. That's why sometimes we can lose like space and time, and you can't think about anything except your own inherent survival. Whether you're having a panic attack and feeling this severe, like, oh my God, I'm going crazy, or if you're just generally saying, I feel like I'm crazy because I don't feel like myself. I don't know what's happening. I can't function at the same level that I used to function, right? So many of us don't understand the magnitude of grief and how it affects us, and how it emotionally drains us, it mentally drains us. So we can feel like we're going crazy when we're not as productive at work, when we constantly like forget our keys or forget something that was really important, or you get to the grocery store and you forget your list. I still do that. But when you're not mentally 100%, when you're so drained that you can't do the things that you love anymore, when depression sets in, we sometimes will think we're going crazy. And I've talked before, there is a difference in depression from grief and depression when we talk about clinically depressed. Difference. So if you are depressed because you're in grief, you're not going crazy. If you're having panic attacks because you're in grief, you're not going crazy. These are normal reactions to loss. Now, what I do recommend, and these are the things that we talk about in my grief course, is I do recommend talking about them, getting curious about them, figuring out where is the panic coming from. Whenever we have this sense of panic, when we feel like we're going crazy, when we feel like things are not how they should be, the response is to get curious about it and say, well, what is actually going on? What are the thoughts that are going off in my head? Why do I feel like I'm going crazy? So if you've had the question and you've said, well, am I going crazy in grief? I want to tell you, probably not. But if you're having the feeling and it feels like you are going crazy, well then, yeah, you're deep in grief. And this is part of the process. It's part of the process that I like to help with, because we need to dive into it. We need to dig through it. We need to figure out what's going on. And the best way to do that is to be in communication with other people. The more we stay up in our own head, the harder things get for us. And I had a different therapist. I've seen a lot of therapists. I've done tons of therapy. I'm very pro therapy. But I had a therapist who also talked about the story train. And I love this concept, and I just want to share it with you so that you can recognize when it's happening to you, because this could be something that's happening and it can make you feel like, well, maybe I am going crazy. So if you stay up in your head and you're thinking all of these thoughts without communicating them to anybody else, we can make up a story. Because if we're not sure about things, We make up a story about it. That's what our brain does. And so if you think of a story like a train, it starts with the engine of the train. That's the first thought that you have. And then every time you go down another path, you add another car to this train. Well, maybe this happened. Well, maybe it was this. This is what that other person was thinking. This is what happened. This is what I should have done. And you can create a train that's hundreds and hundreds of cars long. And if you have a train that's 100 cars long, you're going to feel like you're going crazy. So getting with other people can help you dismantle that train, because it helps us really evaluate what is true, what is real, what is normal as part of the grief process. This is why I say time and time again, you have to get your grief out, and do not grieve alone. When we grieve alone, we get up in our heads. You know what I'm talking about. Say yes in the comments if that's you. And you can go down a whole trail of places that are not good for you. And again, it's part of the process. So I want to help you with this process. So if you think you are crazy, you're not, because people who are crazy don't actually think that they're crazy. That's what my therapist said. So before you judge me on that, and if there's any therapists watching, that's what my therapist said to me. And it made a lot of sense to me at the time. So maybe it's not academically correct, but I think you get my point. So if you feel like you're going crazy, I want you to know that you are not alone. There are lots of people who have that thought. And if you think you are, you aren't. But if you need help in the process, I want to encourage you to reach out to me at griefinspired@gmail.com. Comment here, send me an email, get the conversation going, because as you get that conversation going, it's going to help you process it all in your head. It's going to help you move through these feelings and really help you to become more grounded, more settled, so you don't feel so unsettled in the process. And it's going to help you all around and bring you the clarity that you need as part of your grief process. So I hope that helps. Please reach out to me. Like I said, please comment on these videos below. If you know someone else who is deep in grief, they may be having the same question. So send this video to them, share it on your social media, and together we can grieve better.